Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa's Workshop. In the previous video, where I used a 3D printer to print out the router mount for the new CNC machine, I mentioned to you that I do have a new CNC machine. Now this is the Genmitsu 4x4, so this is a big machine. And for that, I need to have a big table before I can assemble it. So today's video, I'm actually going to be making this table, and I'm going to be making it just a little bit different. I'm actually designing it where it's two tables in one that are going to be screwed together. And if I ever have a situation where I want to separate this down to two smaller tables, well, I can do it quite easily. Now, in addition, I'm not going to be using a traditional type top. A lot of people would just use plywood, or they would build a torsion tabletop, and I'm not doing that either. What I'm going to be doing is using two hollow core interior slab doors. That's in essence a thin torsion box. I think it's going to make a very flat surface, and it's going to be a perfect platform to be able to put this CNC machine on. Now these doors, of course, they're 36 by 80, each of them. So that's going to give me 6 feet by that 80 inches. Now hopefully, once I get this assembled, I might be able to reduce the size of this table and cut it down instead of 80 inches, something smaller. But I want to be able to see how big the footprint is on the CNC machine and how I can set the controller up before I do that. You may notice that some of this wood looks awful rough and it looks quite old. Well, the truth is, yes, it is. This is some old 2x6s that I had. I also have some 2x12s, and I even have some material that was 2x12s laminated together that was left over from a previous project. I'm going to be cutting that up as well. I even have some pressure treated material that I'm going to be incorporating into this build just to be able to use up all of this extra material that I've been storing, quite frankly, for years. The first step in this project is I wanted to be able to cut this material down for the length of the legs. After that was done, I have a manageable piece of material to be able to work with. I can take it over to the joiner and get this all planed down and nice and smooth and get rid of that rough exterior, and it looks like a beautiful piece of wood again. This is not a sponsored video. However, I've been using this CUTECH joiner now for a couple of years, and I have really enjoyed it. So if you're in the market for a joiner, you might want to take a look at this one and consider this as one of the possibilities. I do have an affiliate link in the description below where you can take a look at the different products that they offer. It's interesting to note, you can see the cobwebs on some of this material. You can also see holes that were drilled from being used in other different projects. But all in all, this material still is very usable, and I want to be able to use as much as I can to be able to have it put to good use in the shop rather than just being stored. It doesn't do any good at all just being stored on the lumber rack. It's much better being able to be put to use with this table. I now have all of the legs cut to the proper length, and I've taken all of them through the joiner, and they look like brand new pieces of wood again. Now it's time to assemble the legs, and it's just going to be a real simple process. I'm just putting these two pieces together to form a 90-degree angle, and of course I'm using the glue and the screws to be able to hold it together. To make it easier to assemble, I'm using one of the extra side pieces to be able to support this 2x6. Here's a little tip I want to give to you. That glue makes it where this board is going to slide all around. The trick is to be able to just take the nail gun and shoot a nail into each end of it, and that will stabilize it. At that point, you can then pre-drill the holes for the screws. And I highly recommend pre-drilling all of the holes before you put the screws in. That's going to make it a whole lot easier because these screws will have a tendency to follow the softest portion and follow that grain, and it may go in a different direction than what you want. By pre-drilling all of the holes, you're going to eliminate that problem. Of course, that screw is going to go exactly where you want it. The next step is to put the wheels onto the bottom of these legs. And I'm going to be using a 4-inch wheel to be able to do that. Now, one of the things that I wanted to be able to do is have the locking type of wheel, but unfortunately, Harbor Freight did not have any, and I decided just to go ahead and use these wheels instead. This is a larger wheel than I typically use because I wanted to be able to have it where it will easily roll around the shop. My floor, quite rough, and this will make it a lot easier. For most of the tables that I have, I use a 3-inch or even a 2-inch wheel, and I have found that that makes it just a little bit difficult to be able to roll around my rough floor. So I think this will be a good improvement having a 4-inch wheel. And again, I'll pre-drill everything and screw these wheels on. It's time to begin to assemble this table. Now this cross member is actually 57 inches long and it is a 2x4. And that plus the side of the legs itself will give me the 60 inches that I said this table is going to be. Now of course I'm going to be using glue to assemble this along with the screws, and it's very important to be able to get this as perfectly square as we possibly can. Because I'm building this table into 2 different halves, or in essence you could think of it as 2 smaller tables, being very accurate and making sure that everything is completely square is going to be critical to make sure that these 2 tables join together as they should. Now I must say, using that nail gun to be able to tack it in place before putting the screws in really does make a difference. I am actually surprised at how much easier it is to keep these pieces of material exactly aligned as they should be. Well, here's the true test now. I have this side done and I want to measure it for square. So I'll measure from one corner to the opposite opposing corner and then check that measurement and do the same thing going across the other diagonal. These 2 measurements should be exactly the same. If they're not, then it's not a square. But this is exactly the same measurement, so I know that this frame is actually square. And now I can put that last couple of screws in so there's no adjustment that's necessary. If you're following along and you need the measurements, these vertical pieces that I'm going to be putting in next are actually 27 inches long. Now again, if you add to that the 2x4 on the top and the bottom that's going to be on this material, that will give you the 30 inches, half of my 5 feet or half of my 60 inches. Now again, it's very, very important that these are exactly square to the other portion of the table. So I'm going to clamp it in place. I'm going to make sure that it's exactly where it needs to be before I drill the pilot holes and screw this in. So this is very, very important that all of this remains square, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's not often that you see 2 tables being joined together as one. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. And that's why it's so critical that everything must be square and true, or it's just not going to line up properly. This top piece that I'm adding now mirrors the bottom piece, so again, this is 57 inches long. And of course, I need to line it up exactly to the end, and I'm using my trick again, stapling it in place just to hold it so it does not move and slide on the glue. Then of course, I'll screw it in place with the 2 screws. Now I also have a center piece that will go in there as well. The placement of this center board is also critical because it's going to join into the other side of the table. Now I did do the layout line, so I know exactly where it needs to be, so I can put it in place. Another little trick that I use is I grab a pipe clamp and put just a little bit of tension on that. What that allows me to do now is to be able to move this board and put it exactly on my layout lines without the hassle of it slipping and sliding. So just by tapping it left, right, back, forth, whatever it needs to get onto the layout lines, makes it where that pipe clamp is like having an extra set of hands in the shop. So that's another little tip that you can use to be able to help assemble this type of a project. Now the first side is completed, and now I need to repeat this same exact process on this other side, which is in essence the top of the table. So I'm not going to bore you with taking you through this whole entire step again. We're just going to move to the next step. Off camera, I built the other table, or you can say the other half the table, either way you want to look at it, But it's time now to join the two of them together. So here's the first table. I'm going to grab the second one off the workbench and bring it over here and put them together. To join the two tables together, I do not want to use glue on this part, because at some point I may decide to create two tables out of this. So I'm just clamping it here. But you also notice that there's a little bit of dip in the center, and that was to be expected because there's really nothing that was supporting that portion. So we're going to have to get that straight before screwing it together. I'm going to show you a real simple way to be able to do that. Grab the longest straight edge that you have. In my case, this is a metal level that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to clamp it to the table, and that's going to bring it right up to the point where it's perfectly straight and level, and that's what I want to be able to do. Once I have that exactly where it needs to be, I'm going to clamp these two center pieces together nice and tight, and then I can screw them together. I originally had planned to use bolts to be able to secure this center section, and realized the bolts I had were a little bit too short. So instead of just stopping the process, I went ahead and used screws to screw it together, and that will hold just fine. All that means is if I have to take it apart later in the future, it's just going to be a little bit of extra work taking out all of the screws versus a few bolts. I repeated this same process for this center section as well as the other side. Of course, at the bottom, I did the same thing. In addition to that, I set this wheel up so that it splits the load between the two halves. Now, just so you know, I do have two extra wheels that I'm going to hang on to in the event that I want to separate this into two tables at some time in the future. Because more than likely, I won't be able to get the exact same wheel if I don't hang on to these two. You can see that I'm using the exact same process. I have this straight edge to make sure that this is exactly straight, and then I'm securing it in place. And I'm doing that across this bottom exactly the way that I did it on the top side. Well, it's time now to put the table down and bring in the tabletops. This is a large table for this area, but I think it's going to work extremely well. Now, one of the nice things about these door slabs is that they're fairly lightweight, and they're quite strong. Earlier, I had said that this was a 36 by 80 inch hollow core slab, and here's the label that shows you exactly the door that I'm using. Now, if you choose, you could use the solid core door and accomplish the same thing, but it would add a lot of extra weight. The primary workbench that I have in the shop that I assemble virtually every project on is exactly that. It's a 36 inch by 80 inch solid core slab door that works absolutely fantastic and has done so for years, and it remains perfectly smooth, perfectly flat. This table I think is going to be great because it is extremely flat, and I think it will support the CNC machine perfectly. Well, thanks a lot for watching this video today. It was a lot of fun to be able to build this table because I had to design something that's going to work not only for the present, but also in the future. And I think this is going to be a perfect situation. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you how to assemble this brand new CNC machine by Genmitsu. Now, this is the 4x4, so it actually can put in a 48 inch wide sheet of plywood to be able to carve your larger projects. So hopefully you'll take the opportunity to give me a like for the build of this table and subscribe right down there below so that you're not going to miss out on any of the videos. Now, by the way, this is February 20th that I'm recording this video, and that means I have been on YouTube for 7 years. This is the anniversary date for me uploading my first video, and it has been a wonderful journey. I could not have done it without each and every one of you, and I look forward to many more years of being able to share the different experiences that I do in the workshop and help teach you how to do the same in yours. So for now, everyone, I look forward to seeing you in the next video where I'm actually going to assemble this new CNC machine. Bye-bye, everyone. See you real soon.